Rome, June 1983. Heat shimmers off the Tiber River. Somewhere near the Pantheon, an ice cream vendor scrapes his cart. And up in the Vatican City, that tiny sovereign state behind towering walls, 15-year-old Emanuela Orlandi snaps her flute case shut. She finishes her music lesson, waves goodbye, and steps onto Piazza Sant'Apollinare. Sunlight catches her hair. She's thinking about the bus home, maybe that new Duran Duran single playing everywhere. She doesn't run, doesn't scream, just evaporates. Like smoke. 40 years. That's how long this wound has bled. Not just for a family, but for an entire nation. Because Emanuela wasn't just any teenager. She was Vatican royalty, a citizen of the Holy See, daughter of a man who worked for the Pope himself. And her vanishing act didn't happen in some shadowy alley. It happened here, in the heart of the most secretive power on earth. What followed was a nightmare wrapped in a riddle. Terrorist threats demanding the release of the Pope's would-be assassin. Mobsters whispering about parties for the powerful. Bones buried beneath churches. And a silence from the Vatican so thick, you could choke on it. This isn't some paperback thriller. This is real. A girl swallowed whole by a labyrinth of money, lies, and holy men who knew more than they ever said. Italy still holds its breath. Because when the truth is buried where angels point, you realize some shadows never lift. Let's strip away the mystery for a moment. Forget the conspiracies, the mafia whispers, the shadow games. Who was the girl at the center of this storm? Emanuela Orlandi wasn't a headline. She was flesh and blood, 15 years old. She lived with her parents and 3 siblings in a modest apartment inside Vatican City. Yes, inside those towering walls. Her father, Ercole, wasn't a cardinal or a diplomat. He was a clerk, the Pope's mailman, some called him. A humble man serving the Holy See. That made Emanuela and her family actual citizens of the Vatican. Think about that. She grew up in the world's smallest, most guarded nation. A gilded cage, or so it seemed. Emanuela lived in the cracks between worlds. On one side, ancient rituals, Swiss guards, papal audiences. On the other, she was just a girl. She practiced flute scales until her lips hurt. She pored over fashion magazines, dreaming of the perfect pair of jeans. She giggled with her best friend, Agata. She had a boyfriend, Pierluigi, and scribbled his name in notebooks. June 22nd, 1983, started utterly ordinary. She attended her music lesson at the Pontifical Institute of Sacred Music, just a stone's throw from St. Peter's Basilica. She packed her flute, said goodbye, stepped out into the Roman sun. Then a sliver of strangeness. Around 4 p.m., Emanuela ducked into a payphone near Piazza Risorgimento. She called her older sister, Federica. Her voice was bright, rushed. She mentioned a man, well-dressed, polite, who'd approached her earlier. He offered her a summer gig selling cosmetics. Avon, maybe? Good money, flexible hours. She sounded intrigued. Federica, ever protective, likely cautioned her. We don't know. The call ended. Emanuela hung up. That was the last trace. She never boarded the number 64 bus home. She never walked through the Vatican gate. She never showed up for dinner. When darkness fell and Emanuela still wasn't home, her family didn't just worry, they knew. This wasn't a rebellious teen running off. Not Emanuela. She was responsible, punctual, close to her family. Her flute was her passion. Her boyfriend expected her call. Her vanishing wasn't just strange. It was impossible. Unless something had reached through the Vatican's walls and snatched her from the heart of Rome itself. That payphone call wasn't just her last words. It was the first thread in a tapestry of nightmares. Who was that well-dressed man? An opportunity? Or a predator hiding in plain daylight? The ordinary girl had stepped into an echo chamber of questions, and the answers would shatter everything. 2 days. That's how long the silence lasted. 2 days of frantic searches, sleepless nights, the Orlandi family's hope thinning like smoke. Then, on June 24th, 1983, a call shattered the quiet. It crackled over the Vatican switchboard, a direct line into the heart of the Holy See. The operator listened. A man's voice. Calm. Too calm. No accent they could easily place. Just cold, deliberate words cutting through the static. We have Emanuela Orlandi. If you want her back alive, release Mehmet Ali Agca immediately. The name hit like a physical blow. Mehmet Ali Agca. Everyone in Italy knew that name. The Turkish gunman. The man who, just 2 years earlier, on May 13, 1981, had stepped out of a crowd in St. Peter's Square and fired 4 shots at Pope John Paul II. The Pope had nearly died. Agca was captured instantly, tried, and sentenced to life in Rebibbia prison in Rome, a living symbol of terror. And now, Emanuela was being traded for him? The demand felt bizarre. Impossible. The Vatican couldn't just release a prisoner held by the Italian state. It made no sense. Was this a genuine terrorist kidnapping? Or something else? A sick distraction? A smokescreen? Panic spread through the Vatican's corridors. Calls were made. Alerts raised. The Orlandi family was told, "Stay quiet. Don't speak to the press. Let us handle this." Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered. If they had her, if they wanted a trade, maybe she was still alive. Maybe this nightmare could end. Then another call. Same voice. Same chilling calm. This time instructions. Go to the Church of Santa Apollinaire. Look at the statue of Saint Teresa. You'll find something there. Santa Apollinaire. Right near where Emanuela had vanished. Police rushed to the dim, quiet church. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through stained glass. They approached the statue of Saint Teresa, her stone eyes gazing serenely downwards. Tucked behind her, almost hidden, was a folded piece of paper. A ransom note. The words were typed, demanding not just Agca's release, but a staggering 10 billion Italian lire. An impossible sum. Millions of dollars. And then the crushing part. There was no proof. No photograph of Emanuela holding a recent newspaper. No lock of her hair. No recording of her voice pleading for help. Nothing to confirm she was even still breathing. Just typed demands on cheap paper. The note felt clinical, detached, like a business transaction gone wrong, or a script being followed. For the Orlandi family, the lack of proof was a slow suffocation. Her father, Ercole, clutched the note, his hands shaking. Where was his daughter's handwriting? Her voice? Her face? Why wouldn't they show she was alive? This wasn't how kidnappings usually worked. Terrorists, criminals, they wanted you to know the victim was alive. It gave them leverage. This silence, this absence, it felt wrong. It felt like a void swallowing their hope. And the calls kept coming. Sometimes the same cold voice. Sometimes different voices, muffled, distorted, speaking broken Italian. The demands shifted. Release Agca. Pay the ransom. Stop talking to the police. The messages were inconsistent, contradictory. One call claimed Emanuela was being held north of Rome. Another said she was near the sea. It was like chasing ghosts. Every lead dissolved into mist. Every demand felt like a taunt. Meanwhile, the Vatican itself remained shrouded in an almost suffocating silence. No press conferences pleading for Emanuela's safe return. No tearful appeals from cardinals. No mobilization of the Swiss Guard beyond their usual posts. Just official statements. Brief. Dry. Repeating that they were cooperating fully with Italian authorities. It was eerie. Unnatural. Here was a citizen of the Vatican state, a young girl who lived within its sacred walls, daughter of a man who served the Pope himself. And the institution seemed paralyzed. Or indifferent. Or afraid. Why the silence? Was it protocol? A fear of inflaming the kidnappers? Or was it something deeper? Something they knew or suspected that they couldn't or wouldn't say? The lack of action, the lack of public urgency, began to breed suspicion like mold in the Roman heat. Whispers started. If this was a straightforward terrorist kidnapping, why wasn't the Vatican shouting it from the rooftops? Why weren't they using every ounce of their immense moral authority to demand her release? For Pietro Orlandi, Emanuela's older brother, the Vatican's silence was a physical pain. He knocked on doors. He begged officials. He stood outside the gates, holding a photo of his smiling sister. The answers were always the same. Vague assurances, closed doors, averted eyes. The message was clear. This is being handled. Go home. But how is it being handled? By staying silent? By hiding? It felt less like protection and more like abandonment. The kidnappers' game grew more grotesque. Another call directed police to a phone booth near Rome's Central. Train station. Inside, another note. More demands. Still no proof of life. Then a call to an Italian newspaper. Emanuela is fine. She is being treated well. But release Agca. The words offered no comfort. Without proof, they rang hollow. Cruel. Weeks bled into months. Summer faded into autumn. The initial shock hardened into a grinding, terrifying routine of waiting, false leads, and deepening despair. The kidnappers' voices faded from the phone lines. The notes stopped appearing. The cruel game seemed to be over, but Emanuela was still gone. No body. No ransom collected. No prisoner released. Nothing. The first clues, those frantic days of calls and hidden notes, hadn't led them to Emanuela. Instead, they led down a darker path. They revealed a kidnapping that defied logic. Demands that seemed designed to confuse, not negotiate. A complete absence of the victim's voice. And towering over it all, the immense, impenetrable silence of the Vatican. It wasn't just that the clues felt staged. It felt like the stage itself was being carefully controlled. Someone wasn't just playing a game. They were writing the rules. And Emanuela Orlandi was the pawn lost somewhere on the board, while the most powerful players in the room refused to even look at it. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes it just lets the poison spread. As the 1980s faded into the 90s, then crawled into a new century, Emanuela Orlandi's case didn't grow cold. It festered. The official investigation stalled, choked by dead ends and that suffocating Vatican silence. But in the shadows, a different story was bubbling up. A darker story. Whispers started slithering out of Rome's underworld, pointing fingers not at shadowy terrorists, but at something much closer to home. The Banda della Magliana. Rome's most feared gang. Ruthless. Connected. They ran drugs, extortion, murder. And they had deep, dirty ties to the very heart of the Vatican. Why would they take a Vatican clerk's daughter? The whispers grew louder, pointing to money. Specifically, the catastrophic collapse of a bank called the Banco Ambrosiano in 1982. Its president, Roberto Calvi, was found hanged under Blackfriars Bridge in London just a year before Emanuela vanished. The Vatican Bank was heavily involved. Billions vanished. Dark money. Mafia money. Rumors swirled that the Vatican owed the Banda favors, or maybe owed them silence. The theory hardened. Emanuela wasn't taken by foreign terrorists. She was taken by Rome's own criminals. A bargaining chip. Pressure on the Vatican to clean up its messy finances, to pay back debts, or to look the other way on something far worse. Kidnap the Pope's mailman's girl? It was a brutal message. We can reach inside your walls. Pay up. Or else. Then, in 1997, a jolt. A jailed mobster named Enrico de Pitis, leader of the Banda della Magliana, wanted to talk. About Emanuela. He claimed he knew things. But before he could say much, he was murdered in prison. Shot dead. Case closed. Not quite. Years later, his ex-girlfriend came forward. She swore de Pitis confessed something chilling to her. It wasn't just about money, he'd said. Emanuela was taken for the parties. Parties. That word hung in the air like a foul smell. What parties? She pressed him. Parties for important people, he'd mumbled. Powerful people. Parties where cardinals, politicians, and guys like us mixed. The implication was stomach-turning. Was Emanuela snatched to be entertainment? A victim for depraved gatherings of the rich and connected? Men who thought they were above the law, protected by wealth, position, or even a holy robe. This wasn't just a kidnapping anymore. It felt like something far more sinister. A girl used and discarded by the very powers meant to protect her. But the rabbit hole didn't stop there. It got deeper, darker, and stranger. Just as the mafia theory gained traction, another voice emerged from the shadows of the collapsing Iron Curtain. A former agent of the East German secret police, the dreaded Stasi. He claimed Emanuela's disappearance wasn't Roman mobsters at all. It was an East German operation. The Stasi, he said, snatched her. Why? To destabilize the Vatican? To blackmail the Pope? To trade her for some unknown asset? The details were foggy, the motive unclear. It sounded like a spy novel. But was it any less believable than cardinals partying with gangsters? Other whispers pointed the finger inside the Vatican walls. An insider. Someone with knowledge, access, and a reason to make Emanuela vanish. A priest? A guard? Someone protecting a secret so explosive it required a young girl's life? The theories multiplied, tangled, contradicted each other. Mafia? Spies? Corrupt clergy? It felt impossible to know which way was up. Every path seemed to lead back to the same dark place. Powerful people hiding terrible truths. For Emanuela's brother Pietro, these decades were agony. He chased every lead, knocked on every door, faced every wall of silence. He met with mobsters in secret. He listened to former spies. He begged cardinals for answers. He became a ghost himself, haunting the corridors of power, holding up his sister's photo like a silent accusation. Where is she? The Vatican's response? More silence, more sealed files, more whispers behind closed doors. Then, in 2019, a thunderclap. 36 years after Emanuela vanished, a tip arrived. Not a whisper this time, but a written message. Cryptic and chilling. It pointed investigators to a small, forgotten cemetery. Not just any cemetery. This one belonged to the Teutonic College, inside Vatican territory, near St. Peter's Basilica. A place of ancient tombs and quiet graves. The note had specific instructions. Look where the angel points. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered again. Could this be it? After all the lies, the dead ends, the decades of pain, was Emanuela finally going to be found? Vatican officials, under pressure, finally agreed. On July 11th, 2019, they opened 2 tombs beneath the floor of the cemetery chapel. The world watched. The Orlandi family held their breath. Workers pried open heavy stone slabs. They descended into the dusty, cool darkness. They sifted through earth and debris, and they found bones. Human bones, but not Emanuela's. Forensic tests confirmed it. The bones belonged to 2 aristocratic women buried there centuries earlier. The tip, the dramatic dig, the global attention, it led only to more empty graves. More ghosts. More crushing disappointment. It felt like the cruelest twist yet. A sick joke played on a family that had already endured too much. Look where the angel points. It pointed only to dust. This is where Emanuela's case lives. Not in the sunlight, but in the rabbit hole. A place where mob bosses point fingers at cardinals, where spies lurk in Cold War shadows, where tips lead to tombs full of strangers' bones. A place where every answer spawns 10 darker questions. A place where the Vatican, that immense fortress of faith, seems less like a beacon of truth and more like a vault locking secrets away. Who took Emanuela? The Mafia? The Stasi? Someone inside those holy walls? Or was she just lost? A pawn sacrificed in a game played by monsters in suits, robes, and shadows? The deeper you dig, the murkier it gets. And the only thing that seems truly clear after 40 years of searching is that someone powerful doesn't want this story to ever see the light. Imagine this. Your sister vanishes. Gone. Snatched off the street. And you know deep in your bones that the place she called home, the most powerful, secretive institution on earth, knows more than it's saying. What do you do? For Pietro Orlandi, Emanuela's older brother, the answer was simple. You fight. You fight for 40 years. You fight until your own hair turns gray. You fight until your voice grows hoarse from asking the same question over and over into a wall of holy silence. Where is my sister? This wasn't just a search. It was a siege against the Vatican itself. Pietro became a soldier armed only with photos, with pleas, with an unbreakable love for the little sister who disappeared when he was just a young man himself. His battlefield? The cold marble corridors of the Holy See. The vast expanse of St. Peter's Square. The closed doors of cardinals' offices. He knocked. He wrote letters. He held vigils. He stood alone in the square, rain or scorching sun, holding a picture of Emanuela's smiling face high for the world, and especially the Vatican to see. Look, his silent stance screamed. Look at what you've lost. Look at what you're hiding. He didn't just talk to officials. He talked to popes. 3 of them. First, John Paul II, the pope Emanuela had prayed for after his shooting. The pope whose would-be assassin's name was used by her kidnappers. Pietro met him twice. He looked into the eyes of the most powerful spiritual leader on earth, poured out his family's agony, begged for help, for answers, for anything. What did he get? Kind words, platitudes, a blessing, but no action, no opening of files, no orders to tear the Vatican apart looking for clues, just sympathy and the door gently closing. Then came Benedict XVI. More silence, more closed doors. The institution seemed to fold in on itself, tighter, more impenetrable. Files remained locked away in vaults marked secretum, secret. Official requests from Italian investigators were met with delays, obfuscation, or outright refusal. It wasn't just a lack of help. It felt like active obstruction. Why? What was in those files so terrible it couldn't see the light? Was it shame over the bank scandals, the dirty money swirling around the Vatican? Was it complicity, knowledge of who took her, or why, that they couldn't admit? Or was it something darker, something too vile, too explosive, to ever confess? The wall wasn't just brick and stone. It was made of silence, tradition, and the immense unassailable power of God's own representatives on earth. And Pietro was one man, one broken heart, hammering against it. Pope Francis brought a flicker of something. He called Emanuela's case a tragedy. He met Pietro, listened. He even ordered a fresh internal Vatican review in 2013. Hope, that cruel trickster, flared again. Maybe this pope, known for speaking plainly, would finally tear down the wall. The review happened. Its findings? Never made public. The Vatican files? Still sealed. The official statement was crushing in its emptiness. They found nothing of relevance. Nothing. After decades of whispers linking the Vatican's own bank, its own associates, its own possible secrets to her disappearance, nothing of relevance felt like a slap, a dismissal, as if Emanuela and her family's torment were irrelevant. Imagine the weight of that. Year after year, decade after decade, watching popes come and go, watching the world move on, watching new scandals erupt within the Vatican, financial corruption, abuse cover-ups, while your sister's file gathers dust in a locked drawer. Every denial, every delayed document, every vague statement from a Vatican spokesman chipped away at Pietro's spirit, but never his resolve. He became a fixture, the man with the photo, the voice that wouldn't be silenced, even when the most powerful institution on earth seemed determined to smother his cries. The cost was immense. The strain on his family, the toll on his own life, living with a wound that never heals, a question that never gets answered. Then in 2023, 40 years after Emanuela walked out of her music lesson, a crack appeared. Not in the Vatican wall, but beside it. Italian prosecutors in Rome, frustrated by decades of dead ends and Vatican stonewalling, did something bold. They officially reopened the case. Not a review, a full, active investigation, armed with new technology, perhaps new courage, and crucially new witnesses. Whispers became testimony. People who had stayed silent for decades, out of fear or loyalty, or simply because no one had asked the right questions, finally started talking. Names surfaced. Suspects connected to the old Banda della Magliana mob. Figures who moved in the shadowy world between Rome's criminal underworld and the Vatican's back corridors. Tip lines buzzed. Old evidence was re-examined. For the first time in years, it felt like momentum. Like someone outside the Vatican's grip was finally, seriously trying to find the truth. For Pietro, it was bittersweet. Relief, yes. A fierce, desperate hope rekindled. Finally, he must have thought. Finally, someone is listening. But also exhaustion, and the crushing, familiar weight of the missing piece. Because despite the new witnesses, the new suspects, the fresh energy in the investigation, there was still no body. No grave found. No definitive proof of what happened to Emanuela after that payphone call on a sunny June afternoon in 1983. The Vatican? Its response to the Italian investigation was familiar. Cooperation was promised, but it was slow, measured, filtered through layers of bureaucracy. Requests for access to archives or personnel were complicated. The wall hadn't fallen. It had just developed a small, heavily guarded gate. So the fight continues. Pietro Orlandi, older now, tireder, but still standing. Still holding the photo. Still asking the question into the echoing silence of St. Peter's Square. The Italian investigation inches forward, a fragile candle flame in a very dark room. But the wall of the Vatican still looms, immense and silent. What lies behind it? Shame? Complicity? A secret so devastating it would shake the very foundations of faith? Or just the cold, empty void of institutional indifference? 40 years. A brother's lifetime spent knocking on heaven's door. And the only answer still is the echo of his own voice and the haunting absence of a sister named Emanuela. Let's be brutally honest. The world is full of missing persons cases. Tragedies that fade from headlines, leaving only shattered families behind. So why does Emanuela Orlandi's disappearance, 40 years on, still claw at our conscience? Why does her name echo like a ghost in the corridors of Rome? It's not just about a girl who vanished. It's about where she vanished, and what that place really is. Emanuela's story is a cracked mirror held up to power. Not the loud, brash power of dictators or armies, but the quiet, ancient power that moves behind stained glass windows and speaks in sacred vows. The power of the Vatican, a sovereign state, a global spiritual empire, a fortress built on faith and secrets. Her case forces us to ask the unthinkable. What happens when God's house on earth becomes a hiding place for darkness? Look at the pattern. The years surrounding Emanuela's vanishing weren't holy. They were rotten. The Vatican Bank, IWAR, wasn't just mismanaged. It was a laundromat for dirty money. Mafia cash, slush funds, billions funneled through holy accounts. Its president, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, nicknamed the Gorilla, dodged Italian prosecutors behind the Vatican's walls. Then there was the Banco Ambrosiano collapse. Its boss, Roberto Calvi, the god's banker, found hanging under a London bridge, murdered. Billions vanished. And the Vatican? Deep in the muck. It paid $250 million to settle claims, but admitted no guilt. The stench of corruption was thick in the Roman air Emanuela breathed, and the rot went deeper. While Emanuela's family begged for answers, the Vatican was already burying other horrors. Priests abusing children, bishops shuffling predators between parishes like toxic assets. A systemic machine built to silence victims, protect perpetrators, and preserve the institution's spotless facade. Power protecting power. Holiness as a shield. Now look at Emanuela's file. Locked away. Sealed with a secretum stamp in some Vatican archive. Why? What possible state secret justifies hiding the truth about a 15-year-old citizen snatched off the street? Was she collateral damage in one of those filthy financial deals? Just another cost of doing unholy business? Did she stumble into a world she wasn't meant to see? A world where mobsters rubbed shoulders with cardinals? Where the sacred and the profane met in whispered deals and perhaps unspeakable parties? Or was it worse? Was she preyed upon? Not by a stranger in an alley, but by predators cloaked in respectability? Men shielded by the very institution sworn to protect the innocent? The mobster's chilling whisper, taken for the parties for powerful men, hangs over this case like a curse. If true, it means the Vatican isn't just hiding incompetence or financial scandal. It's hiding monsters. And Emanuela paid the price. This is the poison at the heart of the mystery. It forces us to confront a terrifying possibility. That in the shadow of God's throne, truth doesn't set you free. It goes to die. That faith's most sacred walls can become prisons for secrets too vile to escape. That the institution entrusted with souls might value its own preservation above a single, stolen life. Emanuela isn't just missing. She's buried by silence, by bureaucracy, by the deliberate turning away of holy eyes. The human cost isn't abstract. It's etched in stone. Emanuela's father, Ercole, the Pope's humble clerk. He spent his dying days in a Vatican apartment, his mind fading, whispering one word over and over. Emanuela, Emanuela. A broken man, broken by the place he served. Her mother, Maria, died waiting. Literally. Her tombstone in Rome's Verano Cemetery doesn't just bear her name. It bears a cry from the grave. In attesa di Emanuela Orlandi. Waiting for Emanuela Orlandi. For decades, a mother's love stretched thin across a lifetime of silence, unanswered prayers, and a Vatican wall that never cracked. That's why this haunts us. It's not just a crime. It's a parable. A stark, ugly reminder that power, unchecked and unaccountable, corrupts. Absolutely. Even power wrapped in a cassock. Emanuela's face, young, hopeful, frozen in 1983, becomes a symbol. A symbol of every voiceless victim crushed beneath the weight of institutions that value their own secrets more than human lives. Every child abused and silenced by the church. Every family told to trust the process while the powerful close ranks. Rome knows the truth. The stones of its ancient streets, the shadows of its alleyways, the cold marble of its churches. They hold the whispers. But Rome keeps its secrets well. It's a city built on layers of empire, faith, and blood. Emanuela is just one more ghost in its labyrinth. Her case is a wound that never heals because it's never cleansed. The Vatican's silence isn't just frustrating, it's complicit. It tells us that the institution's image, its power, its control, matter more than one girl's fate. More than a family's agony. More than the truth. So we're left staring at that tombstone. Waiting for Emanuela. Waiting for answers the Vatican locks away. Waiting for justice that feels perpetually out of reach. Waiting for a church that preaches resurrection to finally exhume the truth it buried alive. 40 years. The wait isn't just endless. It's a condemnation, a chilling testament to what happens when light is refused and darkness is allowed to win. Emanuela's story isn't over. It's a question screaming into the void. How deep does the rot go? And how many more must wait? Rome breathes. You feel it in the warm stone underfoot, in the hum of Vespas bouncing off ancient walls, in the slow drip of fountains in hidden courtyards. Stand in St. Peter's Square, as millions do. Feel the sun on your face, hear the swell of a choir from the basilica, the babble of tourists, the shuffle of pilgrims. It feels eternal, solid, sacred, but lean in closer. Listen. Beneath the postcard perfection, beneath the hymns and the history, there's a tremor, a whisper in the stones. Can you hear it? The metallic clunk of a payphone receiver hanging up. Not a sound of connection, but of severance. The final, fading note of a flute, cut short mid-scale. Gone before the melody could resolve. And then a voice. Young. Tight with a dawning fear that hasn't faded in 40 summers. A sister's plea, echoing across the piazza, through the decades, forever unanswered. Emanuela, doves say? Emanuela, where are you? It's the echo of an absence. A ghost note in the symphony of the city. Some say truth has a gravity, that it fights its way to the surface, no matter how deep they bury it. But Rome is a city built on catacombs, on secrets stacked like bricks over older secrets. Saints and sinners share the same soil. Power here isn't just worn in crowns. It's hidden in vaults, whispered in confessionals, buried beneath tombs where angels point to nothing but dust. The truth about what happened to a 15-year-old girl on a sunny afternoon in 1983? Maybe it is buried here. Buried deep. Maybe too deep. Maybe the Vatican's walls are too thick. Maybe the whispers of the mob were silenced for good. Maybe the men who knew, the ones in robes, the ones in suits, the ones in shadows, took their secrets to their own graves. Maybe Emanuela Orlandi became just another sacrifice on the altar of power. Her name another line in the long, dark ledger of things Rome chooses to forget. But her echo remains. It lingers in the cobblestones near Sant'Apollinare. It haunts the hallway of that Vatican apartment where a father whispered her name with his dying breath. It's carved into cold marble in the Verano cemetery. In Attesa di Emanuela Orlandi, waiting for Emanuela Orlandi. A mother's wait that stretched into eternity. So, what do you think happened? Did the mafia take her as leverage over a bankrupt bank? Was she snatched for those unspeakable parties where the powerful played? Was it a Cold War plot lost in the Stasi's shredded files? Or did something far darker, far closer to the heart of the Vatican, reach out and pull her into the silence? The clues are shards of a shattered mirror. The theories, ghosts in a labyrinth. There is no easy answer. Only the echo and the question. Share your thoughts below. What theory chills you the most? What piece of this puzzle feels most real, most damning, most true? Let's keep the question alive, because Emanuela Orlandi deserves more than to be just another forgotten name in a cold case file. She deserves her echo to be heard. And if this story gripped you, if that whisper in the piazza sent a shiver down your spine, then remember to subscribe. Not for the algorithm, not for the clicks. Do it for the stories that demand to be heard. The ones that scratch at the shiny surface of power and ask the uncomfortable questions. The ones about the vanished, the silenced, the ones the world tries to forget. Stories like Emanuela's. Stories that remind us that sometimes the loudest sound in history is the echo of someone who isn't there. Her name was Emanuela Orlandi. She played the flute. She loved fashion. She stepped out into the Roman sun. And she vanished. Listen for her. The echo remains.